Oh, welcome into the Fighting Taters show. My name is Lucas Gephardt. Alongside me here tonight is Ryan Luke and Will Hoenike, who's the former voice of the Idaho Steelheads, will be joining us here in just a couple minutes. Going to talk about kind of the state of hockey, if you will, in Idaho. The reason we're talking about that, not only are the Steelheads just starting up, Steelheads early parts of their season, but Boise just hosted a very high-profile hockey event, the USA Hockey Rivalry Series, over on Sunday at Idaho Central Arena in downtown Boise. USA Hockey Rivalry Series is a 7-game series that the U.S. women's national team plays against the Canadian national team. They have are now 3 games into this series. They had a game in San Jose last week. They had a game in Salt Lake on Friday, and then they played on Sunday in Boise as well. Boise sold out that game. That was a sold-out game in Boise. And then obviously the captain of the U.S. team, Hillary Knight, is from Sun Valley as well. So that's our local tie to that one. So that kind of got us thinking, what's the state of hockey right now in Idaho? How far have the Steelheads come? What is the future of the Steelheads with 3 different new NHL teams now in the Western United States? So that's something that we're going to talk about with Will here in just a few minutes. And as people are starting to jump on, we are live here today on the Fighting Tater Show. So I want to encourage you, if you want to leave a comment, we can put it up on the screen. We can talk about those as well. Don't be afraid to like, share, leave your comments on this show. And you can also watch this show and any show that Ryan and I have done on the IdahoSports.com YouTube channel, Facebook page, and X account. You can also listen to the show on IdahoSports.com or wherever you download and subscribe to your podcast. Right? And you a couple weeks ago, we had Brandon Huffman from 24/7 Sports on. And we'll go ahead and start with this. This just happened, I think, today or maybe even yesterday. Calvin Olbott, who is an offensive tackle out of Fruitland, the latest 4-star recruit for football on 24/7 Sports. He's in the 2026 class. You and I saw him. We had a broadcast in Fruitland a couple weeks ago. I was too focused on the game to notice what offensive tackles were doing, but you noticed him right away. Texted Huff and said, "Hey, you guys got to check this kid out," and he was already on Huff's radar.
Yeah. So, I mean, a bit of a backstory on him is that he was not flying under the radar, but nobody wanted to talk about him. A lot of these coaches, because what happens is you get a coach that comes from, let's say, Idaho State, looks at this kid, sees a kid early on, right? They jump on that. Well, if Idaho State's looking at this kid, then we should look at him. And all of a sudden it kind of snowballs and snowballs and snowballs. And eventually you end up with SEC teams recruiting this kid. So Auburn offered, Arizona out of the Big 12 offered. Of course, Boise State offered, Cal, ACC for now offered, and then Duke out of the ACC offered. Well, ironically, when I got back, I was like, "Hey, Huffman, dude, you got to see this kid. This kid is legit. I mean, he has long arms. He has a kick step. He's listed at 6'5", 265, but I mean, hardly an ounce of fat on him, and just incredibly mobile. And then defensively, he had pressure all night long. I mean, they played Weezer. Weezer doesn't really throw the ball, but when they did, Obot was on him anyway. He's like, "Oh yeah. I think I heard of this kid." I'm like, "I'm telling you, he passes the eye test, and now he passes the playing test." And so, Obot, I think it just took some affirmations and a little bit of momentum. But you see all the offers, and they're going to continue to roll in, and he is a legit 4-star. Now, not to be outdone, Jax Tanner from Rocky, who has a huge game tomorrow versus Rigby, he as well is a 3-star. He's an 88. You got to be to 90. When you hit 90, then you're a 4-star. I think Jax Tanner goes to a 4-star, and that'll be the first time in, well, maybe ever, that that Idaho has produced 2 4-star recruits.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, this 2026 class is certainly shaping up. Speaking of that Rocky Rigby game tomorrow, we'll obviously have that game audio only on IdahoSports.com tomorrow night. But Jacob Flowers, the Rigby quarterback, also into the 3-star ranks as well. So be fun to watch him tomorrow. So let's go ahead and kind of cap off some of the thoughts from last week. You and I texted about these as we wrap up these first couple minutes. Then we'll bring Will in here, but just want to touch on this latest college football rankings out. Basically no change for Boise State. They're still the 12 seed, ranked 13th by the committee. So that kind of tells you maybe they could sneak up to a 10 or an 11. But I thought the game against Nevada was was a bit of a trap game for Boise State. It kind of proved to be that. I mean, it was one of those things where you have Jeff Choate, right, who's got the Idaho roots from St. Mary's, passed up twice by Boise State in the last 2 coaching searches, right? So he's got a chip on his shoulder. Nevada scores its second touchdown on a trick play going for it on a 4th down. That's when I went, this might be trap territory. But Boise State ends up eking it out. And then your Cougs, man, just escaping the Salt Lake night at Rice Eccles. I told you weeks that was going to be a dangerous game. I told you that like 3 weeks ago. Escape.
Well, that was the one that I was the most afraid of. Yeah. Pros and cons, right? And if you saw Kevin Harlan's comments afterwards, I mean, that's the only thing the BYU fans and Utah fans, for that matter, are talking about. Well, I was excited to be in the Big 12, but not now. And it was a bit childish of the way that he went about it. I'll go on record of saying that. But the emotions are so high in that rivalry. I mean, to the point where my brother, I called him afterwards. I'm like, is BYU good yet? Like, I can't figure out if BYU is good yet, because you get on the field and I would say, man for man, yeah, we just don't know. I'd say man for man, BYU is a better team than Utah. The problem is the great equalizer is the emotions, right? And to the point where it's so difficult. My brother, it was like, I don't watch that crap. That hurts too much, man. That's way too difficult to watch. And we're all diehard BYU fans. And so, it kind of goes to show what that means. I wish that Utah never would have joined the Big 12. It would have made life along the Wasatch Front and Cougar Nation a lot better for us. But when you win something like that, it's kind of fun to rub the salt in the wounds. But jumping back to Boise State. So a couple of things. I was talking to some Boise Staters, insider-ish people, and they said what happened is ever since Hawaii laid the blueprint, right? Hawaii laid the blueprint. And I think everybody knew this from the beginning. You have to force Maddox Madsen to throw the ball and beat you with. Yep. He needs to beat you. Ashton Genty went off for 200 yards. I think that's a given. But if you can minimize the damage, right, limit him not to 6 touchdowns, to 2 touchdowns, right? And then it ends up being a ball control, and you can go back and forth and just keep the ball out of Boise State's hands because they end up scoring so greatly. Hawaii really was pivotal for teams playing this Boise State team. And I said to you, look, every team that comes in that plays Boise State from here on out, this is their bowl game. Boise State is their bowl game. It's their conference championship. It's their chance to knock them off. I mean, they're sitting at the top of the hill, and Boise State is going to get their best shot. Now, last thought on Boise State. I think it's very obvious that the committee wants to keep Boise State relegated to that number 12 seed. That's how much they think of the rest of them outside of the Big Four, of the Power Four.
Yeah, I think you're right. And especially with Miami losing, I mean, if there was a chance for them to jump into the top 4 seed, this might have been the week to do it. I think you're right about that. Couple last thoughts here on the weekend that was in college football. Just want to give a shout out to my Bengals here. Idaho State beating Weber State for the first time since 2014. That's a rivalry game, I guess, that they try to make into a rivalry. You got to beat them more than once every decade for that to be a rivalry, I think. But anyway, Idaho State, they're on track. They could have their first winning season here since 2018, first time that they beat Weber since 14. So they're having a pretty good year under Hawkins. And then Idaho right on the bubble, potentially getting a first-round bye as well. So they kind of play the last few games of their season. So could be a home game in Moscow, could be a first-round bye. Some of them have right at that 6-7 seed in the FCS playoffs. Not bad considering they've been playing with a backup quarterback. And then College of Idaho, man, they've lost 2 in a row. I don't know what's happened to the Yotes. You're the one that follows them a little closer.
Yeah, and I was talking to. I did a couple basketball games for him over the weekend. It's the fantastic case of you can't outscore your opponent every single time. The defense has fallen off the rails. I mean, just fallen off. They can't stop anything, right? Like the bucket has leaky holes all over the spot, and they don't have enough fingers to plug those holes. They did lose some major pieces from a couple of years ago, and I think that's showing up in massive waves. And it's unfortunate because I just don't know if offensively, I think they have it all together, but I think the Yotes, they're going to have to rebuild, retool. They do a good job of recruiting, specifically from the Valley, so they'll reboot. I was going to say, so I was just looking, it's 2 hours from Pocatello to Ogden. So there's your rivalry, right? They don't even fly; they drive. They get on the bus.
Rivalry, that's about it. Yeah.
I-15 rivalry.
Yeah, I mean they did beat Weber the entire time I was there. So
hey, the other thing too, you got to keep taking consideration. They're doing this in the Big Sky Conference, best conference of
best conference in the FCS
football.
for sure. Yeah, without a doubt. So. All right, well, let's go ahead and transition. We'll bring in Will here, Will Hoenike, who is the former voice of the Steelheads. Will, I don't know how long you were with the Steelheads, but this is your first appearance here on the Fighting Taters show. A warm welcome to you. Thanks for jumping on, and I'm excited about this one. Anytime I could talk hockey, I'm a big hockey guy. So
I'm excited to get to the bottom of a statement you just said. You said Idaho State never beat Weber State when you were a student there. Did they beat anybody while you were there? That was a rough time for Bengal football those few years.
Maybe like Western Oregon or something.
There we go.
Hold on, Will.
Southern or something like that.
Will, Lucas was at Idaho State for 8 years. Most people are called doctors that go to school for 8 years.
This is true.
Yeah. That's a pretty big span.
Yeah, there are double majors, there are triple majors, and then there's Lucas, majored in everything because he had classes.
Right.
Bad joke. Lucas was 4 years, folks. Back off.
In and out. Yeah. The last year I was there was the last year they had Tanner Guller, who was the quarterback there. They had a decent year. My last year, that was their last winning season. So that was I have it here. That was the 2018 season. And then that 14 season where they won 8 games and were a couple plays away from maybe being a playoff team. That was the year before I got there. And then I'm coming in as a freshman and they lose 10 games the next year or whatever it was. So, but it's good to see them doing well. So,
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, Will, we just came off of a major international hockey event here. This is the first time Boise's hosted this particular event, which is the USA Hockey Canada Rivalry Series. It's like we said in the open, 7-game series that USA Hockey and Hockey Canada put together. This year they play 3 games in the U.S. So they had a game in San Jose, had a game in Salt Lake, and then had a game here as well. And then they'll play 4 games in Canada coming up in February as well. But the reason that this kind of plays in well for us and what we like to talk about on this show is Hillary Knight, who's the captain of the U.S. team, Sun Valley, from Sun Valley, right? So I know that, not necessarily like born and raised kind of Sun Valley, but you look her up on the USA Hockey roster, hometown, Sun Valley, Idaho. So that's got to be pretty cool. And this was a rematch of the last gold medal game that was played in the Olympics too. So these are 2 of the best women's hockey teams in the world.
Yeah, there's a time, you go back to when the Steelheads were first born back in the late 90s. Sun Valley was kind of the hockey capital of Idaho. They had the Sun Valley Suns, the semi-pro team. To this day, they still play up there. Hillary Knight, obviously, 2 kids that she grew up with, Cody Lample and Joey Sides, both went on to play professional hockey. So 3 Sun Valley-ites, and if I'm not mistaken, all 3 of them were transplants, not native to the Wood River Valley, but went to high school there and then went on to play professional hockey. And Hillary, obviously, she's kind of the face of women's hockey, if you will. So it's cool for that event to come back. And I think I was really glad to hear you say that it officially sold out. I heard some of the chatter about it, and I saw some pictures. And I thought the crowd, especially for a Sunday, I thought the crowd looked good. So when you said it sold out, I was excited to hear that.
Yeah, it's great event for the city too. And I just love that Boise was able to sell out a high profile women's sporting event. I just think that was awesome for our city to show up and do that. But part of it is we just have such a passionate hockey fan base here in Idaho. Here in Boise as well. And I really, truly think that Boise is just such an underground hockey market. And, you've seen this grow over the years. What were the Steelheads when you were with them? And then what are they today?
Well, I covered them when they first started, when the doors just opened up and they played in what was then called the WCHL. I was covering them. I was working for Channel 6, the ABC affiliate here in Boise. So I was at the very first hockey game ever at the then Bank of America Center. That's what it was called back then. It was an NHL exhibition game that they actually had to delay because the ice wasn't ready. So they had to basically keep everybody outside while all the final checks and approvals were made. And the Steelheads played their very first game against the San Diego Gulls, and they went to the Taylor Cup finals. And then they merged into the ECHL, which is what people recognize now. But when that team started, it was the shiny new toy. And you talk about kind of the undercurrent of hockey fans now. When the local sports talk radio station here, KTIK, they would have, guests on their talk show every week. And for those of you who have followed hockey, you're going to know what I'm saying. But the host had the goaltender on for a show. And the host was like, the guy's name was Alon Morissette. He goes, Alon, I think it's awesome the way at the end of penalty kills, the way you try to get the crowd into it by banging your stick on the ice. And I love it. You just hear this dramatic pause. And then Alon goes, well, actually, I'm letting my teammates know that the guy's about to come out of the penalty box. But hey, if the crowd gets into it, that's all the better. But that's where Boise kind of was at that point. But what the Steelheads did by showing up and by starting to play, and they had early success under then head coach John Oliver, went to a couple championship finals. They started breeding hockey fans. There are several kids. I went and looked up the names. There are 4 kids that I can find their names right now: Bo Hansen, Zach Walker, Bailey Conger, and CJ Walker. Those are 4 Boise kids who grew up in Boise attending Steelheads games that now play pro hockey at various levels. CJ Walker plays for the Steelheads, actually.
Yeah, he's on the roster this year. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then, you look at it and you look at the kids who came from Idaho, a bunch of players who moved here, never left. Cal Ingraham's still here. Troy Edwards is still here. Rob Dumas is still here. So now you've got these high-level pro players who are now coaching the youth and educating the community. And so that first several years, the crowds were just bonkers. I mean, it was an absolute party down at, again, it was called the Bank of America Center at the time. Attendance-wise, the product's always been good. The Steelheads have won 2 ECHL championships. They've been to a couple others.
They go to the playoffs basically every year.
Yeah, they've been a tremendous, tremendous team. The attendance took a little bit of a lull 08-09 when everything took a lull in Idaho when the recession was there. But, I still keep in good touch with several people who work in the front office to the day. Eric Trapp, the president of the organization, John Cunningham, Steven Anderson, Mike DePalma. And I mean, the thing is they're practically sold out, not for the weekend because they got Rapid City at home this weekend. They're practically sold out for the season. They've got a few games here and there, pockets here and there. So, if you're thinking you're just going to be able to walk up to now Idaho Central Arena on Friday night and say, hey, get me a couple seats on the glass, it ain't going to happen. They're selling out. They have 36 home games during the regular season. I think they've sold out 35 of them 3 years in a row, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. And I might be wrong on that, so don't quote me.
I know last year it was 35 of 36.
Yeah.
Is what they sold out. Yeah, and I know the year before that was a similar, if not all 36.
Yeah, and it's wild. I mean, it's a show. It's a big. My daughter and I love to go to games down there and take them in when we can. It was a little different when I was in the broadcast booth and I was tethered to the headset like you are, Ryan, which is a bit of a problem when you have to go to the bathroom. But you make do. You do what you can.
Yeah, Gatorade bottles.
Yeah. There was a game. True story. To this day, it's the longest game in the history of the ECHL because in the playoffs, you don't ever go to a shootout. You just keep playing overtime and overtime and overtime and overtime until someone scores. And so the game starts, or I go on the air at about 6:50. The game starts at 7:05. Idaho's down 2-0 going into the third. It's a playoff game. And if Idaho wins, they win the series. If they don't, they have to come back and play the next day. The next day would have been game 7 of the series. So they're down 2-0 going into the third. They score 2 goals in the span of about 40 seconds to tie it up, and then it goes to overtime. and then
no one scores again for the next 3 hours.
And then third overtime.
Yeah.
It made it into the fourth overtime. There was 3 minutes left in the fourth overtime. And, I mean, it's kind of how I look playing pickup basketball. Guys just had a hard time getting up and down the ice. They were so tired.
Yeah.
And then finally Idaho won it. And I remember my biggest source of joy is I went on the air at 6:50. It's now like 12:45 in the morning. I had to go to the bathroom so bad. And so we got through the game. David DeCastroza scores the game-winning goal. I do the quick recap, and I say post-game show coming up next. And then I have my producer, a guy named John, back in the KTIK studios and also the Cable One production truck that was there doing the television. And I said, guys, you just keep running commercials until you see that I'm back. And they just laughed and said, okay. And I took off my headset. And I sprinted to the bathroom. Sprinted.
Hey, Will, quick question for you then. So I'm from Eastern Idaho. Steelheads mean nothing to us, right? But I've been in the Boise area.
Kings, though.
What's that?
You got the Spud Kings over there.
Look, man, I'm being completely honest. I am not a hockey guy. I like going to hockey games when I'm on the glass, but I am not a hockey guy. I'll do track.
We'll educate them on the Spud Kings here in a minute.
I would do track and field over hockey. Like that's where I am. But
hey, now that's crazy. That's crazy talk because you're running in circles.
Yeah, right.
What's the point? I mean, at least in hockey, you get a chance to run into somebody.
So what is it? Kenny Powers says he doesn't like practicing. He doesn't like to get good at practicing, and that's essentially what track and field is, right? So Kenny Powers, eastbound and down. Yep. Anyway, so my boys, I have 12-year-old boys, twin boy. We big sports guys, and they're like, Dad, why don't we have a Major League Baseball team here? And I was like, well, there's this thing called a market size, right? Like we just don't have it. So my question is, and we talk about, and we got just done talking about, hey, we sell out all these games. And mind you, I'll go to Steelheads games. One of my buddies, Sam Gardner, has season tickets, and we're sitting on the glass, and it's an absolute blast. Love going to live hockey. Watch it on TV. I couldn't care less. But at what level do you think Boise could support? ECHL, is that about as high as it goes? I mean, at what level? ECHL, for all those who are listening, is about AA baseball.
Correct, yes. It would go, you have the SPHL and the FPHL. Those would be like your single A. The Steelheads and the ECHL AA and the American Hockey League would be considered AAA. I would say if the biggest, and I hesitate to even call it a problem because I think the Idaho Central Arena is great. The problem is there's nowhere for it to go. And you need seats to sell to be able to generate revenue to support the higher cost of operating at a higher league. Some of those guys in the AHL, guys in the ECHL, you might be making $800 a week, $900 a week, which sounds like, really, that's it? Well, there are other ways that they're compensated as far as housing and whatnot to make it worth their while, which is why guys do it, right? But at the American Hockey League level, there are guys making $100,000, $200,000, and you have to pay for that. And with an arena that only seats 5,000 fans, you just can't do it. And the problem with Idaho Central Arena, and again, it's a fantastic arena. You ask almost any player that comes here, they're like, this is one of the best places to play in this entire league.
Guys for the Steelheads, and it's not just the arena. There are guys that play for the Steelheads. They will take pay cuts to play for the Steelheads.
Thomas Scholl came back this year.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, that's kind of what Will Merchant came back last year. I mean, it happens, but there's nowhere. You need to add more inventory that you can sell to generate that revenue as we dip into the business side of things, and there's nowhere to go. And Lucas, with your day job, you'll understand what I'm talking about here. The footprint of the arena, they fill every square inch within their property lines. So you can't expand out. You can't really expand up. The only way you could expand is down, and there's a parking garage underneath the arena. So there are problems.
Which I don't think they own.
No, I don't.
None of the hotels and none of them own the. Yeah, I mean it's not even a city. I don't even think the city owned the Block 22. That group does not own that parking garage.
Yeah, so that's the only place you could go It's, you hear about these football fields and whatnot that they lower so they can add a ring of seats. If it was possible, if it was feasible to do that, conceptually and structurally, that's the only place they could go to add the revenue or the seats to provide the revenue to support it. Now, if you have, or at the AHL level, depending on who your affiliate is, like there are instances of NHL teams owning a share, if not outright, their AHL team. The Edmonton Oilers own the Bakersfield Condors. Calgary owns its AHL affiliate. I believe the Kraken own their AHL affiliate outright. Mm-hmm. They might be willing to operate at a little bit of a net loss at the AHL level if it means, we can have our prospects, in Calgary's instance, right in town, so that we're all able to, mix and mingle, so to speak. So that might be the one way. I think Boise would support it. I would guess, and again, this is based on conversations that I've had. Nobody's come straight out and said this to me. If they could get that arena, it's at about 5,000 fans right now, what you can get into between the arena and the suites. If you could get it to about 6,000, they feel pretty confident that they could sell 6,000 seats. Just the nature of the market being what it is, if you suddenly make it a 10,000 seat arena, I don't know that they'd be able to sell 10,000 seats, but they probably could sell about, I think about 6,000, but there's nowhere to put the seats.
Yeah. And I think that it's tough because it's such a great location, right? You're downtown, you can grab something to eat. It really is. And Boise's, even though we have the tiniest downtown.
It's the first bar on the bar run is what I've said for, that's what they are.
It really is.
It's great. It's such a phenomenal, and I took my kids to it and they're like, Dad, this is really cool. I'm like, yeah, it is cool, right? This is Boise. But the idea is, and they're talking about with LeBois, however you want to say it, the racetrack. In fact, Lucas, your neighborhood just down the hill from me, trying to do some stuff there. What about a new arena, right? A new multi-purpose arena.
What about? I'll throw this at you. I can chime in on this too. What about Extra Mile Arena?
Yeah.
You could take Extra Mile Arena, the Idaho Center is one. You could kind of retrofit and do some stuff, bring in the ice plant, the ice making facilities, so you could have ice and leave ice in. You could look into that, because I know in particular, I've gone to ice events, ice capades and, Disney on Ice and whatnot at Extra Mile. So it's possible. And I know at one point there was at least a conversation in social circles when the Boise Hawks were still affiliated with the Chicago Cubs, and the Cubs were putting all the pressure on. We need a new building. And one of the things they were looking at was a side-by-side hockey arena, or event center, if you will, but hockey arena and baseball facility, and just have the two of them side by side over kind of, over by the river, a little bit closer to the river. There were a couple of plots of land where they thought they could do it. The thing that makes Idaho Central Arena so special is the owners built that themselves. They didn't ask for a dime of taxpayer money. They financed it, they built it, they got it done. I don't know that they'd be willing to do it again, because they'd kind of be cannibalizing a property of their own to start a new one. So you'd need someone, and whether that's, the people of Ada County, whether that's, insert, billionaire with money that he needs a tax write-off for here. That's the type of person that you'd need to probably make something like that happen. But I do think that there comes a time where you could make an argument that just in general, if we want this to grow as a hockey community, if we want this to grow as an event community, we got to keep updating facilities. And again, that's not to knock on Idaho Central Arena. I think it's a fabulous place. I think that they do a tremendous job there hosting events, particularly the sports events. The Big Sky basketball tournament, and Lucas, you mentioned the game this past weekend. They had an NHL preseason game a couple of years ago, the Vegas Golden Knights, and there's one that surprised me. Did any of you guys go to that game? Vegas Golden Knights against the Arizona Coyotes. One of the things I went to it, one of the things I was most interested in, Idaho's NHL affiliate for going on 20 years now has been the Dallas Stars. And it's always been the Dallas Stars. It hasn't, a lot of these affiliates kind of jump around. The Steelheads haven't jumped around at all. It's always been the Dallas Stars. So I was curious to see, okay, this is going to bring out the NHL fans. What are they going to be wearing? And it was probably 3-1 Vegas, the Golden Knights over anybody else, over anything. Like, I think I probably saw more Chicago Blackhawks shirts than Dallas Stars shirts, which surprised me. But I was really, really surprised just the volume of Vegas people that were there. And I mean, and they weren't just people who thought they were cool shirts. They were people who knew the players. They were into it. And I'm like, dang, this is a little bit of a Vegas town from an NHL standpoint, as much as it can be.
I think it helps, number one, that they went to the final their first year.
Correct. Very much.
So that helps them a ton. I also think it helps that they were an expansion team rather than a team moving from a different city. Mm-hmm. But I remember when I was in college, I for a class I had to write a blog, and so I wrote a blog one time about, like, if you're in Idaho, what professional sports teams does it make the most sense for you to root for? And I wrote that it was, for hockey, it was the Dallas Stars because of that long time affiliation. I'm surprised that there's not more Dallas fans here, but I mean, you're right. It's Vegas.
It doesn't mean anything, though, right? The minor leagues don't mean anything to the major. That's it. I mean, who cares? You may like a player, but it doesn't matter. Like, I am a Red Sox fan. Okay, I don't really care about the triple. I go see a Salt Lake Bees game and cheer for them over the Red Sox affiliate. To me, it's more of a regionalized versus, and then when you get to the major league level, the top tiers, that's where you have your team. I just don't think that it matters, right? Who cares? The Dallas. I've been to a Dallas Stars game when I lived in Dallas. I was like, that's cool. I moved here. I didn't know for like 3 years that they were even affiliated, but I was like, Steelheads are cool.
Yeah,
I just don't think it matters.
The baseball to hockey thing, baseball is much better. It's much more linear. Like, the guys you're watching, we'll use the Seattle Mariners because that's my favorite team. They have a single A affiliate in Everett, Washington. Mm-hmm. You can go to an Everett game and you can look down on the field and just know, okay, 3 or 4 of those ball players in a few years are going to be playing for the Seattle Mariners. If there's one fault I have with the NHL system in general, you can't match that linear product. You know, there are a number of players who, you know, play for the Idaho Steelheads at some point that do go pro, but they're not necessarily Dallas Stars products. You know what I mean? Not everybody who plays in Idaho is under contract with the Dallas Stars. For example, there was one Idaho Steelheads player, alumni, if you will, who played in last year's Stanley Cup Finals. His name was Sam Carrick. He wasn't Dallas Stars property. When he played in Idaho, he was Toronto Maple Leafs property. You know, so when you're looking at, okay, Will, tell me some former Steelheads who've gone on to the NHL. There's a few goaltenders, you know, Jack Campbell, Richard Bachman, Dan Ellis, Max Lagasse. So there have been a few, but not a ton. And then what they'll do a lot in hockey, and this is another thing that I've asked coaches in the Stars system, why do they do it this way? And the answer is just because. And here's the example I'll give you. One year when I was the play-by-play guy for the Idaho Steelheads, they had the Stars under contract had 2 rookie forwards. One was named Cole Yulee and the other was named Jamel Smith. And I'm thinking in baseball context, and Lucas, I know you're a baseball umpire, and you said, Ryan, your boys play baseball. You guys are a baseball household. You get it. You want your kids getting innings, right? Well, in the NHL, there's almost like a mindset of it's better for us to have these 20-year-old kids practicing with the AHL team and not necessarily playing that much versus going down a level and playing 20 minutes a night, playing power play, playing penalty kill. So Cole Yulee and Jamel Smith, basically the entire first year of their contracts, I'd have to look up their stats. I don't have them handy. They played maybe 1 out of every 3 games, whereas they would have played in Idaho every single night. And they would have played heavy minutes, and they would have been fan favorites, and everybody would have loved them. And when Jamel Smith eventually made it to the NHL, which he did, he played some NHL minutes, people would have said, I remember that guy from Idaho. but they never really. He did come down a little bit the next year for literally like 7 games or some nonsense like that. But it's a different mindset. Like in baseball, you put your prospects together and you groom them together. In the NHL, that doesn't really happen. I mean, it's just there are times I'm looking at like who the Texas Stars, Idaho's AHL affiliate. I'm looking at who they're scratching on a given night, and I'm like, what good is it really doing this kid, this 21-year-old rookie, to be wearing a nice suit, sitting in the bleachers watching a game in Austin, instead of being in Boise playing 20 minutes and playing on the penalty kill and playing on the power play and just getting a ton of time?
Yeah, I'm with you there. Especially getting in a rhythm and chemistry. Obviously important with hockey, playing at any level, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I want to circle back to we kind of touched on it. The affiliation with the Dallas Stars has been a long time affiliate of the Steelheads. It's the longest ECHL NHL affiliate in the league. It's the longest partnership that any NHL team has with an ECHL team. They just renewed it. I think it was last year, and I think it's up at the end of this year.
Mm-hmm.
We have a new team in Seattle. We have a new team now in Salt Lake City. We have a new-ish team in Vegas. Do you see them renewing with Dallas, or do you think they go with one of those other 3?
Well, I mean, when you're talking about a 20-year relationship, I don't know that you just end that because, we could become a Kraken affiliate or we could become a Salt Lake City Hockey Club affiliate. However, if Eric Trapp and his leadership crew with the Steelheads, if they look at what Seattle at one point Vancouver was rumored to be a potential landing spot for the Steelheads as an affiliate. If one of those teams comes in and they're able to put something on paper that makes more sense for the Steelheads organization, then I think it's very possible they could make a change. I'd be a little bit surprised if they did. But whereas 5 years ago, I think my answer would have been no way. These guys are, the relationship between the Stars and the Steelheads, man, that thing is airtight. That thing is locked airtight. I don't want to say there's
Do you know?
It would be the NHL team to say, hey, look, we need a new ECHL affiliate. We see that you're available. Are you interested? Those kinds of conversations happen fairly regularly. There are a lot of network roads that are intertwined here. So it's not really hard for somebody with, for instance, the Seattle Kraken to get a hold of somebody with the Idaho Steelheads and just say, hey, what's the status of your affiliation? Well, we're up in 2025, just to use that as a number. Okay, well, that means we might have to extend our AHL affiliation in Kansas City for 1 year, and then maybe we could do something after that. Yeah, cool, let's talk. But then, like I say, that's the point where the team's going to come in, they're going to look at the facility, and it's much like Major League Baseball, where they're going to want to see, okay, where are our prospects going? What's the town like? What's the building like? What's the arena like? What's the housing arrangement like? Things like that. And then they're going to say, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to promise X. We're going to promise Y. We're going to commit to Z. But in return, we need you to do A, B, and C. And if they find a common ground, it wouldn't blow me away. It wouldn't be the most stunning thing to happen if this particular agreement cycle was the end of the Stars Steelheads relationship. But I also don't know that I'd bet your family inheritance on it, Lucas, either.
Yeah, for sure. And I do kind of want to circle back to this as well. And you keep in mind that, when back to the discussion of, ICCU Arena, where it is, keep in mind that the company that owns the Grove, same company that owns the hockey team in the building.
Yep.
I think that's an important thing to keep in mind. That group also has Hotel 43 right across the street in the courtyard down by Donna Larson Park, and that Chick-fil-A down there too.
Yeah, so, they've done a nice job in terms of, they built the arena in order to help fill the hotel as a part. They were kind of married together. And then they expanded to Hotel 43 and then the Courtyard. God, what was that? 5 years ago, I want to say. I could be wrong on the timeline of that, but
yeah,
it's a great little setup, and it's part of why visiting teams like to come play here. Is you're staying in the Grove Hotel. You take an elevator down to the B level, and you're there.
Yeah.
There were times when I was the play-by-play broadcaster, when we would play the Colorado Eagles. They were located in Loveland, Colorado. We would stay in Fort Collins. We had a 30-minute bus trip each way just to get to the rink. The same thing would happen in Stockton. But when we went to Bakersfield, the hotel was across the parking lot. When we went to Ontario, guys loved that because there was an In-N-Out across the street. There are things about it that you're going to measure as a player as to what makes a trip attractive. And one of the things that really makes Idaho attractive, they get taken care of on where they live. The apartments up there by Micron, I'm drawing a blank on the name of them now, but they've been there forever. But they're good apartments. They take care of the guys. The building is nice. And then the visiting teams, you take a shuttle basically to the rink, and then you don't leave until it's time to fly out. So it's a really nice setup, and just it's one of, I would say, you'd put Idaho up there with Toledo, Florida, maybe South Carolina as kind of the model organizations within the ECHL. Idaho's right there.
Yeah. So here's kind of where I'm going with it is the Grove Hotel and those three hotels are just as, if not more, a part of the business model of this group than the Idaho Steelheads.
Oh, they're way more. The hotels, that's where the cash flow is you want those hotels full. The business development, that's where the money is. And that's not to say that the owners, and it's a great ownership group. Larry Leeser and AJ Belikoff, and not just they're awesome. They're great. They took great care of me while I worked there. You'll never get me to say a bad word about those guys. But their investment was the hotel. The hockey team and the arena help the hotel, not the other way around.
And it's not just housing the visiting team. It's when they do the Big Sky tournament, that is 20 college basketball teams staying in downtown Boise. I think it's 4 of them stay at the Grove, right?
Yep.
It's when they host youth gymnastic events. Brings in those events will bring in 500 to 700 kids. Over half of them need somewhere to stay. Where do they stay? They stay at the Grove, right? So that is a huge part of a whole nother piece that I don't think anyone thinks about, or maybe not knows about, because these are behind the scenes stuff that I work on every day at my day job,
right?
And I see and are things that matter to this group. Now, that being said, the Boise Center, which is surrounded by the arena, is pretty small compared to what a lot of other convention centers are around the country. I bet, and I don't know, I haven't been in any of these conversations. This is just me knowing what I know about our convention setup and the sports setup and all that. I bet the convention center would love to have the arena right between them, right? Because then that gives them another trade show floor, and now they can bring in way bigger conventions.
Oh, yeah. It gives them a huge – You think about some of those, and they've done – over the years, they've done various shows in there. There's like power sports, with dirt bikes and they
do like a flower show one time. I couldn't bring in a flower shows and stuff. There's a flower show. I was like, come on.
But it's wild. You think about it. You go into the Boise Center, and I don't know how much any of you guys hang out in the Boise Center. They have a couple of really nice ballrooms in there. They have other smaller meeting rooms, but they don't have that big, humongous, grand space where you could have, 150 exhibition booths, or you could host, youth wrestling tournament, whatever it may be. So I would think that should the owners want to, Okay, hey, city of Boise, do you have any interest here? Let's talk. Whether that would fall under the purview of
and then what hotel is the convention hotel for that now bigger convention center? The Grove.
You've got one on either side, because you've got the Grove right here, and then right on the other side you got Hotel 43 across the street. So I would think that there would be a real opportunity there if discussions were heading that way. If somebody came in and said, hey, I've got an extra $100 million with nothing to do with it, I'm going to go over here out by where they're building that new soccer complex out at LeBois. I'm going to build a 6,000 seat multi-purpose sports facility with the intent of playing the Steelheads there. Hey, but what do we do with this? I would think that the city would raise their hand and say, hey, let's talk.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, and like I said, going back to hotel rooms are the business. If you expand the convention center, now you're bringing in bigger conventions. That probably helps them too. All that to say, if they are to move out of ICCU Arena, if that's ever to not be a thing, I think that would be what drives it. Is the convention center wanting to be bigger? They work out something,
Well, those owners, we talked about the Block 22 ownership group. They're businessmen, right? Mm-hmm. So you go to them with an offer that makes sense. They're going to sit down and they're going to have a cup of coffee with you, and they're going to talk it through and see if it can work. And maybe it can, maybe it can't. But that's why you have that conversation.
Yeah, and that's I still think years down the line from anything like that happening, because the reality of it is this: if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And this is why I don't think they're going up to the AHL. For what you talked about, now you're dealing with two-way contracts where you're paying guys way more money, right? And you have fringe guys. Like, as me as a hockey fan, I would love to have AHL here, because more of the guys are recognizable and stuff like that. From the business standpoint, I just don't think it makes sense. You're selling out 35 to 36 home games.
Yeah, I think it's probably business-wise, and this is a guess because I'm not privy to the books. Business-wise, I'm guessing it's probably at best a wash, because any extra revenue you're bringing in is going right back out to pay those higher salaries. However, from a fan standpoint, you get potentially an NHL first-round draft pick spending most of his year playing here in Boise. Lucas, you're a big hockey fan. I mean, that alone is probably going to get you to go to a couple of games.
A couple more games, yeah. I mean, I have no problem going to, we probably go to about one a month. So, I mean, it's great entertainment. All right, I want to shift now to the east side of the state, because we've ignored them for the first 50 minutes of this show.
Ryan looks really glossed over right now, too.
Hey, Ryan, you were asking about Idaho Falls, right? So they have a team that's in second year, maybe third year.
I think it's the third year, if I'm not mistaken.
Third year. Okay. So Idaho Falls has a new arena, the Mountain America Center. Mm-hmm. Kind of built with the same idea, but they have a junior team. So and junior hockey, and Will, maybe you have a better way of explaining this. Basically, it's college hockey, basically.
Except you're not going to class. But it's kids in that same general age range. Yeah. 17 to maybe 20. Yeah.
Yeah. So the question here is, I haven't been out to a game yet in Idaho Falls. It's on my Idaho bucket list. I want to go see one. What do you know about junior hockey? How good are these kids that are playing in Idaho Falls? And you just said we're probably not seeing a whole lot of future NHLers in Boise, but are we seeing future NHLers in Idaho Falls?
Time will tell. The leagues, it's a feeder league, so you have and I'm probably getting the lingo wrong, but go with me. But you're kicking people up the stairs, right? So okay, I'm on the second rung of the ladder here in Idaho Falls. Kick me up to the first rung. Okay, first rung. Now I'm going to major junior, which would be your Spokane Chiefs, your Portland Winterhawks, your teams like that, and those are your NHL first round draft picks. There's a kid playing in Spokane right now who was the 8th overall pick in the NHL draft last year. And they were drafted. His name's Berkeley Catton. He was drafted by the Seattle Kraken. They retain his rights, and they sent him back to Spokane and said, go play one more year in Spokane. So some of those kids, mostly what you're playing for there is you're hoping to get a shot to go play some college hockey. and get your college education maybe paid for, maybe land yourself a scholarship that way.
Mm-hmm.
And to that end, I think it's working. I think it does its job. There's a kid, I do the Idaho 8-Man podcast, and there's a kid from Kendrick, Idaho, who would be playing in the state semifinals tomorrow with the Kendrick football team against Logos, except he's playing for the Spokane Braves in the Kootenai International Junior Hockey League. And you may have never heard of it.
Picked hockey over football, huh?
that would be that step in between. That would be, okay, your Idaho Falls here, then you go to the KI, and then the KI is a feeder league. Specifically, Spokane will put some kids there that they want to keep eyes on to maybe play for the Chiefs someday. And then so you get to the Chiefs, okay, now you go out and have a couple of good years for the Chiefs. Now you're on an NHL roster. You're on you're getting an ECHL contract. You're getting an AHL contract. So his name's Tanner Clemenhagen. He's 17 years old. He's 6'1", 180 pounds, and he's a couple steps away from playing major junior hockey. And I think that for the Spud Kings in Idaho Falls, I think that that's what those kids would aspire to do. I think that's what they want to do. But if they don't, hey, it'd be pretty cool if I got a chance to play college hockey out of this.
Yeah. And hockey is so different the way it works. And this probably all going to change with the recent, NCAA announcement thing that they came out with. But currently it's, you basically play junior hockey before you go to college. So college freshmen and kid playing for Notre Dame or Michigan or whoever, instead of 18, 19 years old, they're like 21, 22 years old.
Yeah, there are guys that have come to the Steelheads, a lot of them, and it's mostly out of Canadian universities. Yeah. So University of Alberta, McGill, something like that. They've played their 5 years of major junior. They've exhausted their major junior eligibility. And now, as part of the major junior thing, they set aside money so you can go to college. So you go to college and you get your degree and you decide, I think I still want to play a little bit more hockey. So here you are, a 26-year-old rookie, and you're playing against kids that are 21, 22 that maybe came straight out of major junior. So that's not uncommon at all to see a guy that's 24, 25, 26 years old and essentially in his first year playing pro hockey, because he did the major junior into the Canadian college route to eventually play pro.
Yeah. It's totally different from the way. And then I kind of learned about this watching. I'm a big Avalanche guy, so watching Cale Makar come up, the Avs drafted him out of UMass like 2 or 3 years before he played for Colorado, and then he makes his NHL debut in the NHL playoffs because UMass just came off a Frozen Four run, but the Avs retained their rights to him back when they were getting 60 points a year and had a top 3 draft pick. So they picked Cale Makar 2-3 years before he even comes up and plays in the NHL. Yep. But he's playing at UMass. You just don't see that in any other sport.
They're guys, and it's becoming more and more common where you'll be watching the Frozen Four and you'll see a guy and it'll be like, well, this is a guy that's probably going to be playing second line minutes for Pittsburgh next year.
Or next week.
Or next week, maybe. But it's becoming more and more common. And you talk about guys that sometimes get kind of stashed away. That'll happen a lot with European kids. You'll see an NHL team draft a kid out of Sweden or Finland or the Czech Republic or, insert European nation here. And they'll say, just stay there and play. We retain your rights for a certain amount of time. Just stay there and play. We'll bring you over to training camp. We'll keep tabs on you. And then when you're ready, we'll transition you to North American hockey.
Yeah. Just so interesting how it works. So, all right. So a few minutes left here. Kind of want to close with this discussion here. NHL is now in Salt Lake City. I've been trying to make the case for, I think hockey and the interest in hockey is going to absolutely explode in Eastern Idaho because of this. Because now you have Pocatello, which is 2 hours away from Salt Lake City. You have Idaho Falls 3 hours away and with a junior team, right?
Mm-hmm.
I kind of look at the case study of what happened with the interest in basketball in the state when the Jazz came to Salt Lake City.
Mm-hmm.
I just think it's such a similar thing is going to happen. And I think we're going to see, especially, and it might take them a year or two. I think new ownership group with Utah now might take them a year or two to get on a playoff run. But I'm telling you, when that Salt Lake market and that Eastern Idaho market gets their first look at an NHL Stanley Cup playoff run, it's going to take off. There's no better playoff system in sports, in my opinion, than the Stanley Cup playoffs.
Yeah, and the way that the whole thing went down, as far as Salt Lake, moved. They're the former Arizona Coyotes, right? So they basically went from, hey, we're Arizona, to now we're Salt Lake and we're playing. I mean, what
They made the announcement in
90
what,
days?
April?
The turnaround was insane. So, I think you're bang on in that, give that group a year. Give their marketing people and their sales people and their community relations people a year to kind of reach out and mine those markets a little bit, like Pocatello, like Idaho Falls. I absolutely think so. I mean, you think about Eugene as a Portland Trailblazers market. How many people will make that drive up I-5 to go to Trailblazers game? When I was a kid, people used to drive all the time from Spokane, my hometown, over to Seattle to go watch the Sonics play, NBA basketball. So I think you're right. I think that there is a golden opportunity there for them to sell a lot of tickets, sell a lot of merchandise, and create a lot of fans.
Yeah, and I don't think it's an accident that they're the Utah Hockey Club this year, because you're getting those diehard fan bases. Like if I lived in Salt Lake, I would have a Utah Hockey Club jersey. I just would. And then next year I would buy whatever they
the Yeti or whatever they pick.
Yeah, the Yeti. Yeah, right. But I think that was a genius move by them, and I think you're right. Give them a year to get in, and I think the team wise, Arizona wasn't great last year, but I think in the ownership group that had the Coyotes was an absolute mess.
Brutal.
They tried to play in literally every building in the Phoenix area and couldn't make any of them work. And to give you an idea, the last year they were in Phoenix, they played in Arizona State's building, which is basically the same size as ICC Arena. It's 5,000 people. Mm-hmm. And the NHL basically stepped in and was like, you cannot play there.
Yeah, we're not continuing this. Agreed. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, Arizona, and I know this because when I was in grad school, I went to church with a guy who was the owner of the Coyotes, and he didn't even want him. He got it kind of like in the settlement, and he was like, what am I going to do with this? And it was so misrun, and he didn't care. Eventually, they sold him off and to another group, and the other group really didn't care either, and it was just this entity that was floating. Little known fact, Ryan Smith, college buddy of mine. We were at BYU.
Oh, no way.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
I'll show you some pictures of him. We had some good times. But anyway.
Those are better stories for off air, right?
Yeah. Well, dude, come on. We're at BYU. How wild do those get, right? Let's
tell me. I've never been there.
Well, I'm telling you, man, those Mountain Dews at midnight get a little crazy, buddy.
There you go. Caffeine high, man.
But moral of the story is that the vision of Utah becoming this sports hub, and then look at the Larry H. Miller Group, who did end up selling the Jazz to Ryan Smith, and then with the Real Salt Lake. But I think, just again, I haven't texted him or talked to him about this at all, but would be that the baseball team they want to land. They wanted the Oakland Athletics, right? That was part of the whole play. But if they do expand, and Major League Baseball is talking, where there's smoke, there's fire. Me personally, I don't think there's enough good talent out there to connotate two more Major League Baseball teams. You'll just water it down. But I think Utah gets that, and I think that Smith Sports Entertainment Group would be a minority owner with the Larry H. Miller Group. Now you're talking. The only thing you're missing at this point is an NFL team, and then you'd have to compete against Utah and BYU for football. But putting it all together, that Eastern Idaho is like flush with all kinds of professional sports that they can get to. Hop, skip, and a jump. I-5 or I-15, just run down. You can hit it.
And from a business standpoint, if you're, if you're part of Ryan Smith's group and you're on the business side, you don't care about the product on the field. MLB just wants somebody to write the expansion fee check. They just want somebody to say, oh yeah, I'll give you $1 billion. No big deal. And then from that standpoint, the business people, hey, it's not like it was in the 70s. We may not have Pete Rose and Steve Carlton and the Big Red Machine and whatnot, but what we do have is we have corporate suites, we have digital rights fees, we have all these things, and we can turn this into zillions and zillions and zillions of dollars. I think it's funny, and you guys, I'm sure at some point have probably done this, because first and foremost, we're sports fans, right? You hear these things about, Jerry Jones, bought the Cowboys for $1.25 while he was having lunch at a Wingstop back in 1991. Now he can sell them for like $4 billion if he wants to. I mean, the financial appreciation is insane for these things.
Yeah, I've always said if I had $10 million, I'd have $1 billion pretty quickly.
Yeah, I'd love to go back in
nice.
time.
Yeah.
Just, we'll pool our money. The three of us will pool our money. Then we'll get into Doc Brown's DeLorean, and we'll go back to about 1975, and we'll buy the New York Jets or whoever.
How about not the Jets?
I'm thinking revenue. I'm not thinking fandom here. I'm thinking revenue.
Yeah.
And our family's they're basically gonna live off the interest for generations just on that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's absolutely insane how much, like, you buy a sports team 30 years ago and all you do is just sit back and watch it grow.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yep.
Last thing here on Utah and why I think that team down in Utah, I think in a couple of years is going to be really successful. And I think Salt Lake is going to quickly emerge as one of the best hockey markets in the Western United States. I think it's Denver right now, excluding the Canadian cities. Yeah. But I think that's going to rival that. And I think this new ownership group, seeing what they do with the Jazz, kind of committed to, putting a good product on the court with Utah, right? So big difference between basketball and hockey. It's a lot easier to retain talent in the NHL than it is in the NBA.
Why?
You don't have
Why?
You guys are more humble in the NHL.
Demographically speaking, they probably fit in Salt Lake a little bit more. So,
yeah, that too. Yeah, but you could draft a kid in the top 5, top 3, and it's not crazy to have that guy stay in that same market for his entire career.
Yeah.
The best player in the NHL currently plays in Edmonton, Alberta.
Yeah. Right.
That's Connor McDavid. He doesn't play in New York. He doesn't play in Chicago. He doesn't play in LA. He plays in Edmonton, Alberta.
Yep. And you saw that a little bit before the salary cap, before the lockout, with guys kind of going to bigger markets because there was no salary cap in the NHL. So the bigger markets had the more money. And that's when you saw the Gretzky going to LA, right? That's when you saw Messier go to New York, but that's not the case anymore. And teams are, and to win in the NHL too, you got to have depth. And that is the number one thing in the NHL. So I don't know. I think give this group a year or two. I think Salt Lake's going to be buzzing. I think that's going to be a really exciting hockey market.
Yeah. So. They've got an ECHL team right now, the Utah Grizzlies. And on any given night, they get 5, 6. They play at the Maverick Arena,
Center.
Maverick Center,
West Valley,
in West Valley, and that's when Salt Lake City hosted the Olympics. That's where the Olympic hockey was played. Was in that building. Mm-hmm. There's actually a wall in there. Okay, it's kind of tucked away. It's a storage room now, where a lot of the hockey stars, they all signed the wall, and you can go in and you can walk in and you can see it. So it's this beautiful facility. I expected, and it may still happen at some point, when Utah announced that they were moving, or when Arizona announced that they were moving to Utah, I just assumed that Tucson, which was Arizona's AHL affiliate, would move to West Valley and play there where the Grizzlies are playing, and the Grizzlies would, I mean, whatever would happen with the Grizzlies would happen with the Grizzlies, because it's a good building. They already draw good fans. There's already a fan base there, like you said, Lucas, but now you've got NHL players that are your own. So I think you're right. I think it has a real opportunity to blow up.
Yeah. Quickly, last question here, and then we'll sign off. What do you think happens with the Grizzlies in Utah?
Eventually, I think they move. And whether that is a move, like sometimes you'll see a franchise go dormant for a while, and then those franchise rights will transfer to another city, another ownership group. Something like that's happened before. I think eventually that's probably what's going to happen, because it's really hard. If you're the Grizzlies, it's really hard to kind of be heard now over the Jazz, BYU, Utah, and the NHL. They've got a great little niche audience, a great little niche product. They've got a great building. So it's a good place. I liked going there. That was one of my favorite road trips in the ECHL when I was a broadcaster. But long term, I think what starts to happen is you start to see the attendance do this. And so if they can find, maybe them and Tucson just kind of switch places, and Tucson becomes an ECHL team, whereas West Valley becomes an AHL team, or one of the California AHL teams. There's some sort of a switch there. I mean, I don't know. Hard to say, but long term, I don't know that it works.
Yeah. Well, this was fun.
I can see how much fun it was on Ryan's face.
Listen, don't mistake this. Like, I'm literally absorbing all this. I'm a sports fan first and foremost, right? And so listening to all this is all just like new information to me. You want to talk about baseball? We can do this, right? I can have the same conversation of baseball, but just not knowing how hockey works at that level, right? Like, I played pond hockey when I was a kid, and that was about the extent of it, right? A little roller hockey here and there.
I played floor hockey in high school.
With a broom.
Yeah. Oh man, yeah. I love talking hockey, Will. So
me too.
You're welcome back on the show anytime. Steelhead's got a local player on him, so if you guys haven't checked him out yet, go check him out. CJ Walker is his name. So so Steelhead's kind of starting up their season. Spud Kings starting up. I don't know if they've started up yet or not, but if
they've started. Yep.
Okay. Yeah. So. Go check out some hockey. So go Steelheads, go Spud Kings. So for Will Hoenike and Ryan Luke, my name is Lucas Gephardt. We're the Fighting Taters, and we'll see you next week.